So today we are going to talk about complex numbers and multiplying and dividing complex numbers. So for these first couple examples here, or for all these examples, we need to remember that I squared equals -1. So we always need to remember that I squared equals -1. So for these first two examples, all we need to do is take this 3i out in front and distribute it through to each term in the parentheses. So when we distribute it through, we have 3i times 6, which is 18i, and 3i times 2i, which is 6i squared. Now we know that I squared equals -1, and 6 here is being multiplied by I squared. So really, 6 is being multiplied by -1, which means we can cross out I squared and then just change our sign in front of 6. So now we have 18i minus 6. And then we need to write all these in the standard form. So we have -6 plus 18i. So we just got to make sure we put these back into standard form then. So for this one here, once again we distribute. So -4i times 11 is -44i. And -4i times 3i is -12i squared. And I squared equals -1, so we can cross out our I squared and then just change our sign in front of the 12. So now we have 12 minus 44i. That's all we have to do. Just be sure to put it back into standard form. Now for these examples here, we have to FOIL distribute these. So we have 5 times 3, which is 15. And then we have 5 times -6, which is -30i, and 2i times 3, which is 6i, and 2 times -6 is -12i squared. Now we just need to collect like terms. First, I'm going to collect the i's. So when I collect these i's, I get -24i. Now I'm just going to bring down my 15 and my -12i squared. Now, once again, I squared equals -1. So we can cross that out, change the sign in front of our 12. So now I have 15 plus 12, which is 27, and then 24i. So our final answer is 27 minus 24i. Now, same thing over here. We FOIL distribute this. So 4 times 8 is -32, and 4 times 7i is 28i, and 2i times -8 is -16i, and 2 times 7 is 14i squared. So we collect like terms again, and we have -32 plus 12i plus 14i squared. Once again, I squared equals -1, so we just change our signs. So now we have a -32 and a -14, which gets us -46 plus 12i. So hopefully these aren't too tough. So we got 2 more here where we have to FOIL and distribute. So FOIL distribute these. So we have -30 plus 60i minus 25i plus 50i squared. Collect like terms. So -30 minus -30, or sorry, we have 60i minus 25, which gets us 35i, and plus 50i squared. I squared is -1, so we can cross that out, change the sign. So collect like terms again, we have -80 plus 35i. Alright, and last one for FOIL distributing. So we have -2 times 4, which is -8. -2 times -3i is -6i. positive 6i. And 4 times 4 is 16. And 4 times negative 3 is negative 12i squared. So collect like terms. This becomes a positive 12, so we have a positive 12 and a negative 8, which gets us a 4. So 4 plus 22i. So we'll just flow distribute, collect like terms, and then put it in the standard form. Now, when we multiply, we are going to, once again, we cannot have i's in our denominator, just like we couldn't have radicals in our denominator. So to get rid of our i's in the denominator, we have to multiply by the conjugate. To do that, for these, all we have to do is change the sign in between, just like we did before. And if we had 4i in our denominator, our conjugate would just be 4i. So kind of the same concept as we had when we were talking about conjugates with square roots. Kind of the same thing. So for our first example here, our conjugate is going to be 1 minus 5i. And on the bottom we multiply first terms, and we multiply last terms. So we have 1 times 1, which is 1, and 5 times negative 5 is negative 25i squared. And then on top, we take this 2 and distribute it to each term on the right. So we'll have 2 minus 10i. So I squared is negative 1, so we change that. So we have 2 minus 10i all over 26. And we can factor out a 2 from each term in here, so we are left with 1 minus 5i all over 13. So we just have to factor out a 2 from each term to get to this. Next one, our conjugate here is going to be 6 plus 3i. And once again, we multiply our first terms and then multiply our last terms. And up top, we just have to distribute that. So we'll have 24 plus 12i all over 36 minus 9i squared. And I squared, once again, equals negative 1. So we can cross that out and change our sign here. So we have 24 plus 12i all over 36 plus 9, which is 45. Now we have a GCF here, which is 3, so we can divide each of these by 3, and we're left with 8 plus 4i all over 15. In our last two examples, once again, we have to multiply by the conjugate. So we have 4 minus 2i over 4 minus 2i. On the bottom, we are multiplying first terms and last terms. On the top, we actually have to FOIL or distribute those. So let's take care of the bottom first. We have 16 minus 2i squared, 4i squared. And on the top, we have to FOIL distribute those. So we have 20. We will have 20 minus 10i plus 4i minus 2i squared. And we can collect like terms, and this becomes positive 2, this becomes a positive 4. So we will end up with 22 minus 6i all over 20. And we can take out a GCF there of each of those terms, which is 2. So divide each one by 2, and we get 11 minus 3i all over 10. And that's our final answer. Also, make sure our complex number on the top of our fraction here is also in standard form. So if this here would not be in standard form, we need to also put that into standard form. In our last example here, multiply that conjugate, which is 3 plus I. On the bottom, we will have 9 minus I squared, and up top we will have 6 plus 2I plus 18I plus 6I squared. So this here is going to become a negative 6. This here is going to become a plus 1. So we will actually have these two terms cancel out. So we're going to be left with 20I all over 10, which just simplifies to 2I. So just remember, just like we talked about in radicals, you cannot have i's in our denominator, just like we couldn't have radicals in our denominator. So we have to multiply by the conjugate, and then make sure everything is in standard form if we can do that.